So Sarah, I'm going to let you introduce yourself how you deem necessary and get started.
All right. Well, thank you guys for having me. Thanks for coming to this session. So we're going to be talking today about adapting interventions to accelerate learning, and we're going to look at something called the taxonomy of intervention intensity. And my name is Sarah Benz. I'm a senior researcher over at American Institutes for Research. But more importantly, I coordinate the targeted and intensive technical assistance for the National Center on Intensive Intervention. And Perry sprung on me that I had to do two truths and a dream, and I will not be doing that today. That is not my God-given gift, but I will tell you about the taxonomy of intervention intensity. So in doing so, I hope today to also be able to introduce you to the database individualization process. We surely couldn't talk about this tool without bringing up DBI. So I hope that's something that you learn. And then obviously introducing you to the taxonomy, as well as some other resources that support the taxonomy of intervention intensity. So to really set the stage, we're funded by the Office of Special Education Programs. We're in our third iteration. So we've been in the game since 2011. And really our charge is for students in Tier 2 whose interventions are unsuccessful. So when we think about those students that we've tried things on and it just hasn't worked, they really present with these severe and persistent learning and or behavioral needs. That's kind of the charge of our center. So at that, so again, when you think about the triangle at the very tippy top of the triangle. So from that, the center established the database individualization process that you see here. It is a research-based process for individualizing and intensifying interventions through systematic uses of assessment data, validated interventions, and then research-based adaptation strategies. It's an ongoing process. I'm not selling you anything that's scripted, fortunately or unfortunately, right? But it's an ongoing process and not just a single intervention. And sometimes when we think about students with disabilities, they really kind of stay in this database individualization process. So the process is really made up of 5 iterative steps. So at the tippy top, the DBI process builds on that validated intervention program that's been delivered with fidelity, keyword there. And when we say validated intervention program, we typically say that thinking it's an evidence-based standard protocol intervention. You progress monitor that, so those data are regularly collected to determine if that student is responding to the intervention. If they are, great, celebrate. If they're not, what do you do? We move on to step 3, where we collect diagnostic data about why the student, to figure out why the student is not responding. And so again, these data may be formal, informal, but just giving us maybe start to develop a hypothesis as to why a student isn't responding. In step 4, we go to the intervention adaptation. So we take the hypothesis, the educator's expertise, and really kind of individualize the intervention, adapt it to meet that student's individualized need. And then step 5, you continue progress monitoring it, and really using the data to determine, did it work? If it did work, great. If not, you go back up to figure out in step 3, that diagnostic data piece. So in our work at the center, and I'm sure in your guys' work on the SPDIG, we always get teachers, district administrators et al. Asking, what do we do when Tier 1 isn't working for students? Or how do you adapt an intervention? I did this, intervention with this student, it didn't work, I don't know what else to do. Well, enter the taxonomy of intervention intensities. So really today's focus is giving you guys more additional context and consideration for how do you choose, evaluate, and adapt that validated intervention program. So we're focusing really on steps 1 and steps 3, or steps 4 of the DBI process. And to teachers, educators credit, I get it. There's a lot of components to consider when you are thinking about what intervention to implement with students, right? I mean, you got to have opportunities to respond. You got to give them concrete learning opportunities. Got to make sure my explicit instruction is in there. And so we at this center thought, wouldn't it be helpful if there was some sort of framework to really guide our thinking when we decide what interventions to use, and then eventually how do you adapt them to individualize them for students? And so thus began the birth story of the taxonomy of intervention intensity, because we start asking ourselves these sort of questions. Does the evidence suggest that this intervention will lead to improved outcomes for this student, right? Is the group size or opportunities to respond conducive for the student? Does this assist in generalizing skills, right? That was a big one. We know we have students who can do the skill and intervention, this really well-designed intervention, but can they transfer that over to the general education classroom? And so at the same time we were asking these questions, in 2017, an article came out that really kind of made it concrete for us. And it was by Lynn and Doug Fuchs and Amelia Malone, and really kind of put out these questions. So that was the birth of the taxonomy of intervention intensity. So when we asked educators, what intervention are you going to use with students? We really asked them first to kind of rate where this intervention falls on the taxonomy of intervention intensity. It's really always interesting because you do tell them there's no intervention that's perfect. And so to think that you're going to find the most perfect intervention for this student is just, really not going to happen. So what you do is you find the best intervention for the student that you can, and then do some other things to make sure that that intervention is really bolstered. So for instance, we always start with strength and evidence. Is there evidence suggesting that this intervention is really expected to lead to improved outcomes, right? And if it's not, we suggest finding a different one that is, but if it's not, knowing ahead of time that this is maybe uncharted territory, right? We also ask them ahead of time to understand the dosage. This is really important. So again, we're not saying the kid has to have 45 minutes because we're very agnostic of what program package to use, but we're saying, does that student have enough opportunity to receive feedback from an interventionist? Alignment is another one of the components of the intervention, the taxonomy. And so have you considered the antecedents, behaviors, consequences? How well is the intervention matched to the targeted academic skills or behavioral concerns? We already kind of went over the attention to transfer. The comprehensive dimension really asks how well the intervention incorporates those explicit instruction principles. And so, as an educator is deciding which intervention, we really encourage them to say, are there opportunities for explicit instruction? When you get down to adapting an intervention, if this intervention hasn't already been adapted to include more explicit instruction, we ask them that's a good one to go ahead and tweak. Just add more explicit instruction, and that's a good way to individualize and tailor for the student. And then what I love about the intervention, the taxonomy of intervention intensity, is that if you have a student whose primary concern is academics, at this point, we ask you to consider, are there behavioral supports that this student may need? And vice versa, if you have a student that has behavioral concerns, rare is the day, although if I asked you to raise y'all's hand, you could think of a student, I'm sure, but rare is the day that you're going to have a student that is only behavioral without academic being impacted, or only academic without having some sort of behavioral challenge, whether internal or external. And so it's also on this chart that you consider the other component in here, really considering the whole child. The last component of the taxonomy is, can this intervention be individualized for a student? And so again, having the teacher rate this for both academic intervention it works for, as well as a behavioral one. And these are located on our website. So nice little graphic. We have lots of educators that just print these out, or interventionists that print these out, put them beside their desks as they're thinking about what intervention to choose. But then as you go on, we also provide support for rating. So this is just a chart to rate. Again, we're not saying between, scores between 15 and up are phenomenal or anything, because again, you're rating this intervention for the student that you're wanting to do it on. So it could vary based on the student's needs. The scale really is 0 to 3, and it can be used to evaluate individual educators that are implementing with one kid, or even a team. I often suggest that teams that you have that weird curriculum closet, go in there, because you may find some gems, and just rate your interventions ahead of time so you already know what you have. What is the efficacy of this intervention? What is the dosage requirements? Does this fit within our crazy master schedule, right? So this can also be done with a team. We have other resources to support the taxonomy in general. We have done some of the work for you. So I'm not sure if any of you have heard or used our tools charts, but it's a great place to send educators to. What we do is we rate the research on all of these different interventions. So the one example that's on the screen is for fraction face-off. And so we've taken a lot of the guesswork out, because this is a popular one that teachers use, educators use. We've taken the guesswork out of what is, the efficacy of fraction face-off. So we've provided some of these briefs, and they are located on our tools chart. So if you go to our website, intensiveintervention.org, it's under our tools charts under academic interventions. And these are the interventions that we have currently done. So again, if you have districts or in your schools that are using these, this has already been done for you, right? We already have the dosage requirements. We have we've rated them on explicit instruction. And so this is a great resource for people wanting to kind of, it takes it beyond the standard, here's what the effect size was, right? And takes it a little bit deeper than that. We also have this really well done module that does a much better job in 30 minutes describing the totality of the taxonomy of intervention intensity. So this is in depth, it's free. I think you have to register, and it takes approximately 30 minutes, but we see a lot of great results from this for educators that are just like, I don't know what to do with this kid. Can I help? And potentially this resource can help you, give you next steps. We also know it's important to think and support our English language learners as well. And so we've come up with a brief on how can that taxonomy of intervention intensity support those students who are English language learners. And so not being able to only evaluate the interventions, but when the interventions need more tailoring, when the student doesn't respond, again, another place that you can really bring in that taxonomy of intervention intensity. And then last, I would be remiss if I didn't completely and shamelessly plug our inaugural Intensive Intervention Institute. So if you're wanting to know more about DBI in general, how the taxonomy works in between, and you're wanting to sign up, you guys are literally the first people that we've launched this to. So way to go, small group. So we're very excited to be able to provide a deeper dive. Again, I think this is becoming more and more important as we're thinking about how do you accelerate learning, and seeing some gaps. Teachers have to progress monitor to know when to individualize and tailor the interventions for students. And so we're really excited to be able to think and imagine what that can look like in a 2-day kind of setting. So that's the spiel, which I did in 13 minutes and 30 seconds, faster than I practiced. I apologize, but I am so excited to hear some questions. And if y'all don't have questions, of course I have questions for y'all.
Thank you, Sarah. Thoughts, questions, comments, feedback?
If I understood you right, these resources are free to educators?
Yes, they're completely free on our website, intensiveintervention.org. We have a lot of great modules. One that I guess I will also plug, since we're in the question portion of this session, is we have some really great modules on progress monitoring. And if I don't know about y'all, but in your SPDIG world, I'm sure they're great at progress monitoring, but out here in NCII, we are struggling with progress monitoring. So that is one that I often point people to, just to give, and again, just knowing more doesn't mean that they'll do better, but at least gives me a foundation to work from, and we can have a common language in which to establish monitoring or progress monitoring. But yes, everything is free on our website. Take it, use it, adapt it, just kind of give us a little wink and a nod for NCII if you do.
And if I break these up, do I break it up better to go through your modules individually, or perhaps in a group setting in, like team collaborative grade level team time?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. I think they're both. So our approach to technical assistance is we have leveraged a lot of community of practices lately in this kind of new iteration. It used to be we really went deep with a specific district or specific state departments, but now we're kind of saying, you know what, we just want to go with goers. And so I think it's conducive to both, really. If you want as an individual person want to go through the modules, great, because you know what, one teacher can do data-based individualization. One teacher can do it. However, is it better to do when you have more heads collaborating on why the student may not be responding to an intervention? Abso-freaking-lutely, right? And so in that case, having that team come around is a wonderful resource. But again, we get down to the brass tacks of it. Can one teacher do it? Yes. And I think so it can really be either, but great question.
Thank you, Sarah, because that's good to know, because most of the teachers I serve are the sole educators,
Yes.
the very rural, tiny districts. So
Yeah, no, definitely. And, I have been supporting one educator in my community of practice from New York City Public Schools who was just so excited about DBI. He didn't know what he was excited about, but he's like, can I meet with you every 2 weeks to talk about this? Because I really don't have like a niche here. And so we do. And the light bulbs that I can't believe are going off. And it makes me so excited. He's impacting 30 kids every single day. And that's probably more kids than I feel like I've impacted in a long time being at a center. So it's nice to be that close to the work and really champion the one educators that want to do it. It's awesome. Anything else? If not, I've got questions for you guys. If that's allowed. Okay, well, I'm going to ask my question. So you guys are all involved in your SPDIGs. You're, I think, closer to the ground than we are. What are you guys seeing as kind of pain points in intervention within your SPDIGs? I think the one that I hear a lot is we don't have any teachers, so we'll skip that one unless you have a particular great point to bring up. But I'd love to know from you all, like, what are some pain points for you guys in getting people to do intervention? What are pain points in just getting them to adopt what y'all are doing? Should I pull popsicle sticks? I'm just kidding.
For me, it's training. Oh, Veronica just said the exact same thing. But our SPDIG is new, and all of our PD will be around the component of our MTSS framework that is instruction and intervention. And so one of the assumptions in your guide framework thing.
Nice. Nailed it.
Thank you. Yeah. The long deal that you showed.
DBI process. Yeah.
Yeah, that doohickey was that they're using a valid, high quality intervention. Yeah. So that's where we are. Yeah. So what are the interventions that you have? How do you know they're good? How do you know you're using them to fidelity? So those are where we're working, and then hopefully we'll get to the we'll get deeper over the 5 years.
Yeah. And I see too, Veronica, I don't know, is she attached to you? Do you guys do the same work or just have the same issue? Oh, okay, great.
We just have the same, I said it out loud and she typed it. That's exactly, yep.
Yeah. And I love this idea of thinking about it in small districts too, right? They often, it's a big undertaking when they adopt some giant framework, and you kind of have to go on deep. I mean, I worked in a small district and we were like Study Island until we died. I'm pretty sure I just found my Study Island t-shirt. And there was no efficacy at the time for Study Island. In fact, there was a whole bunch of problems putting kids on computers that can't read the words on the computer and asking that to be progress monitoring, right? And so I appreciate the work and I appreciate the problem that you guys are facing, especially in those smaller districts. And I also read an Ed Week recently where teachers said that they no longer wanted to hear the word fidelity. They knew it was important, but they are just not there. They just got to get to work every day, right? And so I also appreciate that you guys are going in and really trying to push that because it is so essential. I know they don't want to hear about it anymore, but yeah. I'm like, were you guys hearing that? But yes, amazing.
You can make me do it, but you can't make me do it right.
Exactly.
I need
Exactly.
to try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's hard.
Stacey, yeah, finding time for intervention. I mean, if that isn't like I'm pretty sure I only got my PhD because I wanted to fight the master schedule. Like that was my only job. Like I'm going to go out and do another new master schedule. So finding the time for intervention. But I like to say, if we're not doing that, what are we doing, right? Like we have to help these kids learn. So I appreciate that problem as well. And then when do you train? Yeah, Stacey, like you've got all these educators in this crisis happening. When do you find time to do the professional development? They're not showing up for coaching sessions. I mean, I think it's definitely an issue. Yeah, thank you. Everybody else's interventions or SPDIGs must be going swimmingly. So that is, it keeps me in the game when some of them are going very well. Yeah. Meg throwing out hearts. Well, Perry, I don't have any other questions. If you want to end this session early, people can grab their coffee before they have to springboard to the next thing, but
Sure.
yeah.
Thank you. The next thing is you can go into a Zoom lounge or you could adjourn for the day. The Zoom lounge is available. Our directors / coordinators, evaluators, family engagement, and all other roles.